I'm sure you've heard many scary and disheartening statistics on marriage, or you may even have witnessed or been a product of a failed marriage. Whatever the case, you do not have to become what you've come from, seen, or heard people say that is contrary to what you want for yourself. Whether you're married or looking to be married, you can take action now to cultivate a joyful and fulfilling relationship that honors God. Hi, we're Thomas,
and Marcia.
and we are passionate about helping young Christians build marriages that honor God and raise godly children.
In this webinar, we'll introduce you to a powerful tool designed to help you take inventory of the 5 key areas that are essential to a thriving marriage: communication, values, intimacy, finances, and support system. By focusing on these areas, you can identify and address the pain points that often lead to a lifeless marriage and instead build a relationship that is full of joy and purpose. Our goal is to equip young Christian married couples and those preparing for marriage with practical knowledge to avoid common pitfalls that drain joy from relationships. We'll guide you through a free assessment that will help you pinpoint where your marriage is thriving and where it needs attention, giving you a clear starting point for creating a God-honoring marriage. This webinar is for Christians who are married or looking to be married and want to build a relationship that not only lasts, but flourishes with joy and fulfillment. Using these 5 critical areas will help you uncover and address the mindsets and behaviors that can jeopardize your marital success. Discover how marriage can be the beginning of a joyful, God-honoring union rather than just an end goal.
So let's start with values. Values are simply fundamental beliefs or principles that guide personal behavior, decision-making, and interaction with others. Now, this is very important because based on your belief system and based on your principles, you act in one way or the other. And in marriage or relationship, when values are not aligned, it's very difficult to agree on the most important things that drive the marriage to success and growth. When 2 people do not have shared or common values, they will be misaligned as far as the purpose of the marriage is concerned. Now imagine 2 people traveling with 2 different perspectives as to where they're headed or where they're going. That's what it looks like when we don't have shared values. So if your values on how to raise children differ largely from your spouse, you are going to have conflicts there, or you would be predisposed to having conflict.
One of the key characteristics of a healthy marriage is unity. And unity is driven by a shared vision, which is birthed out of common values. So if your values are in agreement and your vision is in agreement, you're in a good place to have a healthy marriage. But on the other hand, if you are not in agreement about your shared values, you'll really struggle with a sense of aligned vision. You might begin to feel confused about the direction that your marriage is headed, or you might begin to feel unfulfilled as you see things heading in a way that doesn't align with the most important things about you or to you. Your partner may be well-intentioned, but struggling to meet your needs because they're behaving and acting according to their values or what they think are your values that are not actually your values. And so it's so important to have a clear sense of what your values are and communicate them and be in agreement with your partner about them so that you can walk together.
I think it's important to also note that your values are not merely things you desire or some states that you desire to be in. They are intrinsic and inherent beliefs and principles that you hold dear to your life. And so that is why they define how you behave and how you make decisions and how you interact with others. They're not merely things that you're seeking to become. So if a thing is not deeply embedded inside you and guiding you in your decision making, in the way you interact with others, and in your personal behavior, it is not yet your value. You may admire people who have that nailed down already, but you don't have that yet. So in determining what your values are, it's important to also note that they're not merely things that you desire or certain outcomes that you desire in life.
That brings us to our next key area of marriage, which is communication. When it comes to your values, you're going to have to be able to communicate them clearly to your partner. We hear the word communication tossed around a lot. Communication is key to marriage, which is true. But I think a lot of times people are confused about what exactly communication is. I think people sometimes feel that communication has to always have agreement involved, but you don't always have to agree to communicate. Actually, the purpose of communication is to exchange ideas clearly, right? It's to yield clarity. You're exchanging information, thoughts, feelings one to another. And the goal of communication is to bring clarity, is to bring understanding. It's not necessarily, first of all, to agree, but it's first of all to bring a sense of meaning to a conversation that you're having with someone. Therefore, your communication needs to be honest. Like Thomas mentioned earlier about values, you don't want to express a value that you aspire to but don't actually have. You want to convey a value that is your deep conviction upon which you act currently.
So, since communication is the exchange of ideas, thoughts, feelings, or information, I think it's very important to be transparent and vulnerable. When two people are communicating and they are completely vulnerable, the flow of information or ideas or whatever they're trying to express is not hindered. Whereas when two people are communicating and they're not entirely or totally transparent, there will be a glitch. Now, think about any system that communicates in the world. Two phones communicating or talking to each other, transferring or transmitting information, say your Bluetooth. If your Bluetooth is not discoverable, no one is going to find it to send it anything. That's how communication works. You have to be found, you have to be discoverable, and that leads to vulnerability. So sometimes, even in security terms, you may turn your Bluetooth off, meaning no one can discover you. And sometimes that plays out in marriage where someone is off, but the other person is trying to find them to convey an idea, an information, a thought, or feeling to them, but they are not even found. That is what vulnerability looks like. For us to be able to yield good communication in marriage, we have to be found. We have to be vulnerable. We have to be seen. We have to say, I'm here. You can communicate with me. Then the file, in the case of the computer example that I gave, can be sent to them and they can receive it and then respond to it. When we are not found, when we are not transparent, when we are not open, communication is hindered.
Of course, on the other side of communication is the person who's actively listening to what it is that you are trying to convey. And that person also needs to be honest and vulnerable about how well they've understood you, right? And so that person should be asking questions and listening carefully and making sure that they're on the same page as you. That's what's going to bring you guys to a place of good communication and understanding between one another. On the other hand, if you're not able to convey that clarity, that meaning, that understanding, you'll both feel confused. You'll both find yourself at loggerheads, I think is what
Right.
you usually say. Yeah. So you'll be questioning, what exactly is real. You'll be questioning, you'll be making assumptions that probably are not true. And you'll be trying to orient yourself in the conversation and find yourself just lost and frustrated. So communication is super important, even if you're not yet at the place of agreement, but just to even have that initial sense of understanding and clarity.
Yeah, I know we defined communication already, but I think it's very important to understand what it really is. I'm going to reiterate it again. Think of it as really just exchanging ideas, thoughts, information, or a feeling. That's all it is. So we're not trying to first operate from a very, say, perfect or pristine place. We are only seeking to transmit something to the other person. That is the intent of good communication. I feel something. I want you to understand what I feel. I'm thinking about something. I want you to hear about what I'm thinking about. Or you on the listening side, you are feeling something. You want to communicate that to me. So let me position myself to receive whatever the thought, the idea, or the feeling is that you want to transmit to me. Now, once I have received that in good faith, I can also process it and give you feedback. That is what communication looks like in every sense of the word.
Now, good communication is key to developing intimacy. The more often, the more honest, the more vulnerable your communication is with your partner, the more intimacy will grow in your marriage or your relationship. And intimacy is that sense of connectedness, it's that sense of closeness, it's that sense of familiarity between one another. And so that's super important for building trust within your marriage.
Absolutely. So, in light of that, it is really helpful to just over communicate. You cannot communicate too much. In other words, you cannot tell your partner what you think in a way that is just too much. You have to be forthcoming. You have to communicate what you feel and what you think. And the more you communicate, chances are the better you would become at communicating. On the other hand, if you restrain yourself from really communicating with your spouse, you become poor at communication. And I think that is true for anything that can be learned in this life. If you want to become good at something, do it. If you want to become good at swimming, swim more often. If you want to become good at sleeping, sleep more often. Oh, that's a funny one, but you get my point. So if you want to be good at communication, communicate more. Yes, of course, maybe you would start learning about some of your errors in communication, but that's also good because you get to learn about your errors, correct them, and communicate better. So over communicate, talk to each other more often, exchange ideas, exchange information, tell each other how you feel about something, talk about things of interest, spend time communicating more and more, and you would become better at it. Let's talk about intimacy. Intimacy points to closeness, connectedness, familiarity, and really oneness, which is what marriage is all about. Two people becoming one, two people drawing closer and closer to each other. And I'm sure you've often heard people say, you are starting to look like your spouse. Or when you live with someone for a long time, you learn their mannerisms, you can predict what they would think about a thing or what they would say about a thing. And that's the beauty of marriage. As we live together, we draw closer to each other. And that makes intimacy very important in marriage.
I think often when people think about intimacy, they're thinking about sex or sexuality. And we want to broaden the idea of intimacy to a human need. Intimacy is more than just a need in marriage, although it is one of the pillars of marriage. And if you're not intimate in your marriage, you will struggle in your marriage. But we want to broaden the topic of intimacy beyond marriage because intimacy is a human need, whether you're married or not, whether you're single, whether you're a child, or whether you're an elder. And some of the key elements of intimacy include, of course, vulnerability, trust, openness, closeness, proximity, physical touch, right? And think about just right when a baby is born, how that they need all of those things, right? They need your touch. They need your eye contact. They need your communication, right? They need your vulnerability. And those things are actually quite literally the things that help a baby to grow and thrive. And so right up into marriage, you're developing intimacy in the various relationships around you. Now, once you get to the marital stage, you want to work even harder at this because you're working at a oneness relationship, not just, a relationship like your child-parent relationship, which often actually detaches as the child gets older, right? Because the child becomes an adult who now garners their own sense of independence and will move on to create their own family and so forth. And that new family involves marriage, right? And so when they move from their parents into a relationship with a spouse, they're now going from this with their parents back to this with their spouse. And so intimacy is one of the key things that will drive the marriage toward health, growth, and ultimately oneness.
So I think intimacy is a flow state, right? Two waters flowing into each other or two bodies flowing into each other. And it's important because that's where we realize the intrinsic value of marriage. When we are intimate, we work together. When we are intimate, we find common ground. When we are intimate, we trust each other. When we are intimate, we cover each other. We share in the same honor. And that is the beauty of marriage. So, intimacy, as Marcia said, goes beyond what we usually think, which is also important. Sex is important. That is sort of the ground upon which we communicate that essence to each other, that I have so much value for what we have in this marriage that I'm willing to share in such a private thing with you, which is what makes sex very sacred. It's not just something you do for the pleasure of it, that you just go around doing it with everyone you find on the street, but something you share intimately, something you share. It's a special thing. So when we are intimate, we are sharing something common to both of us. And that is what makes intimacy extremely important in marriage. And when it's lost or when it's gone out of the marriage, we begin to look outside the marriage because there is no place to share this thing that we value with each other, to share a piece of myself, and also to enjoy or value a piece of the other person. So we look outside the marriage. It ought not be so because where there is intimacy, there is trust, there is transparency, there is security, and we are able to share in each other.
The next critical area that you want to take inventory of to ensure that your marriage is on a healthy trajectory is finances. Now, finances goes beyond how much you and or your partner bring in as income. Okay, finances has to do with financial planning. It has to do with your household economy. How are you agreeing to steward the money that flows in and out of your household? That's what finances are all about in marriage. And your financial fidelity is, first of all, to God, then to your spouse, your children, your household, your family. Okay, so when you think about money, every decision that you make should be to honor, first of all, God and what He, and implementing the wisdom that He has given us for healthy for a healthy financial life and for a healthy marital financial life as well. And then, of course, you want to agree with your spouse about the decisions that are being made, about how money is being managed in the home.
I think it's important to view finances from the position of a steward. And that is what honoring God is about. Your finances are not just yours to do whatever you want, and your finances are not just something you gain by your own strength. The Bible talks about how it is God who gives us the wisdom to make wealth. So if you're operating from that viewpoint, first of all, you know you are accountable to God. And that's good for you because it shields you from dissipating. Knowing that I am going to render account before God should help you make informed decisions and ultimately wise decisions. Now, the other thing that we want to talk about is financial oneness. Since we are one in the marriage, we ought to be one in our finances. Now, I know this is a very touchy area for a lot of people, but even if at the moment you don't do your finances as one person, meaning the two of us becoming one in our marriage, or you don't do your finances together, that is something you have to work toward. It's one thing acknowledging that there is wisdom in financial oneness. And this is what God wills for us because He made us or He put us together to become one. It's one thing to acknowledge that and say that we are not in a position to do that, but we hope that one day we will grow toward that. But it's another thing to just say, no, we would never, we don't even value financial oneness. I think it takes away from the marriage. Good, successful marriages that truly honor God are one in all areas, including finances.
If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And so when you think about the finances of your marriage, think with a long-term approach. In your marriage, you're working together with someone, it's going to be slower potentially than what it could be alone. That is in the beginning. It catches up. Okay. But and not just with your spouse, right? Assuming you have children, the children are also going to slow down your, financial growth. But that is all good. That's something to embrace in your marriage. So I just want to I want you to keep that in mind without going into too much detail about this critical area, is just to know that it's a growing area, especially if you take care of all the other areas of your marriage that we've been mentioning. If your marriage stays healthy, stays strong, and stays together, your trajectory is up financially. Okay. So just be encouraged by that.
Next, we want to talk about support system. Now, this is crucial. Support system has to do with anyone or anything who upholds your marriage or helps it to flourish.
So that hopefully includes your family members, your close friends, but also think, like Thomas said, about people who uphold your marriage. So that could be people who don't even know you that well, but have the heart of God for marriage, such as couples that frequent your local church who have gone ahead of you in marriage, such as it could even actually be one of your single friends that you wouldn't expect, but has more of a biblical view on marriage than the married friend who is maybe struggling in their marriage, on the brink of divorce or divorced, and rather than giving you godly counsel, commiserating over all the, struggles of marriage and maybe sort of pulling you in their direction.
Yeah.
Okay. So your support system, like Thomas said, is anyone or anything.
Yep.
So that can also be books. That can be this webinar, tools, resources. Okay. That would help to uphold your marriage and maintain it.
It's important to note that marriage is not done on an island, right? You can't just be with your spouse away from everyone, away from everything, and have all the wisdom in the world to flourish in your marriage. You're more likely to run into roadblocks. So it's important to recognize that marriage or marriages that do well have support systems.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you can say that for anything in life that flourishes consistently over a long period of time, nothing does well without good support system. Children don't grow well when they don't have good support systems. Students don't do well when they don't have good support systems. Marriages do not do well when they have weak support system. And you have to be really intentional about this. It doesn't come naturally. It's not just because you're married doesn't mean you are immediately going to have the support system you need. It's something that sometimes you have to go out of your way to value it, to look for where there is wisdom and align yourself so that you can glean from that wisdom. So that includes being intentional about the people that you bring into your life, the friends that you're making, being intentional, targeting people, sometimes submitting yourself to people who are thriving, and importantly, have the fruits to back where they are. It's important. It's not just wisdom from anyone you meet, but wisdom from people who have gone through what you're going through and have the results and the fruit to back what they're doing. They can help guide you. Like Marcia said, it could be books, it could be podcasts, resources. Especially if you know where you're struggling in your marriage, say communication isn't that straightened up, reach out for resources regarding communication, and both of you work on it. Be diligent and value the health of your marriage so that you can get the wisdom you need to grow it.
Yep, that kind of intentionality is going to put you in a great position for your marriage. A lot of people, I think, take that for granted when they find that they're highly compatible with their spouse. Even when you're highly compatible with your spouse, life happens. There are things that are beyond you. There are external things that can come into play in your marriage, things you didn't expect, things you don't know how to navigate. And as compatible as you may be, as aligned as your values may be, as intimate as you may be, without help, first of all, from God and from a good support system, you may find yourself really, really struggling. And on the other hand, if you're a couple who, you know, early in your marriage, you're finding, wow, this is starting out a lot tougher than I thought. It's not too late for you with that same intentionality that Thomas mentioned of finding and fostering and establishing a strong support system. You can change the trajectory of your marriage. You don't have to stay in the struggle zone. You can improve, you can grow. And so that's what we want for you guys. Obviously, a practical piece of advice we can leave you with, again, without going into too much detail, just right here in this webinar, is plug into a local church. Okay, plug into a local church that your pastor or some of the leaders there may be able to point you to a really great book or resource. You may lay eyes on a couple who, like Thomas said, has the fruit that you're looking for.
Yeah.
And you would be able to reach out to them and, just invite them for lunch or for coffee. Just really humble yourself and ask, we really would like to learn from you guys. We really would like to sit down with you and just talk through some of our marital concerns with you.
Yeah.
And you'd be amazed at how that can be a blessing to your marriage.
Yes. And remember how we began this webinar? You do not have to become what you've experienced, seen, or heard. You can change things.
Mm-hmm.
You can go into marriage totally different from all of your experiences by being intentional and seeking out wisdom.
We hope this webinar has been helpful to you. And finally, this webinar is to point you to a resource that we want to share with you, which is an assessment tool that we made. It's a quiz, and we have a married version. We have a couples version, engaged, wherever you are
single
in your relationship life. And we encourage you to take it and find out where you stand in these 5 key areas that we've covered today. And from there, you can start having some really important conversations with your spouse based on, the information that you get from the quiz. And that's going to be a great starting point to work on your marriage. Whether you're already in a great place, it can only help, or whether you're really struggling, it'll give you that starting point that you need to work on your marriage. So
if you're doing well, even if you're, finding great success in an area, sometimes it's good to also be validated for the good that you're experiencing so that you don't maybe mistakenly think you're not doing well.
Right.
And that is what the quiz will bring out. And we often advise couples to take it independently because the way that you're thinking about something in your marriage, say communication, is probably not the same way your spouse is thinking about it. And it's really interesting. You may find out that you think intimacy is no problem at all in your marriage, and your spouse, on the other hand, thinks we have some issues with intimacy. And right there, you have something to talk about. Something just pops out to you, and you have a conversation about it. And if you're single, it will be helpful to you to point out some important areas that you need to look at if you're considering marriage. And especially if you're engaged, before you say I do, you want to touch on some of the important parts or aspects of marital life before you walk into it. You want to have all the important conversations before you step into it and be overwhelmed. So the quiz is really important. It will be helpful to you. We will leave a link here on the video somewhere. And wherever you see this video, you can check the description. You can also go to our website at calledtomarriage.org. That is calledtomarriage.org. And you would find the quiz there. Take it. It's free. It gives you a personalized assessment of where you are and areas you're doing good at and areas that you could do better at.
Just want to reiterate, take the quiz individually and come together with your results. Or if you're single, take it individually. And no matter how the results are, if you find yourself needing extra support or help, we also provide that. So you can explore our website after the quiz as well and check out our marital coaching offerings, premarital coaching offering, and hopefully that can be a blessing to you. If you're single, we have community on Instagram. Depending on when this comes out, we may have community
On our
available on
website.
our website as well. So yeah, join the community so that you can find like-minded people to grow in your journey with.
Yeah. And feel free to also check out our podcast. We have episodes that touch on most of the things that were discussed here. And that could be a good first place to start. Say, if you're not ready to book a session with us, you can go on YouTube, find Called to Marriage or any of your podcasts, any of the podcast players that are out there. You can access our podcast, listen to it, and start from there. We just want to be helpful to you and make sure that young people are going into marriage knowing what to expect and also providing helpful information to help you thrive in your marriage, find joy, honor God, and raise godly children. All right. So thank you for staying with us. Bye.